Hi, this is Kim. I'm in the kitchen. And today we are going to go into making both a caramel, that's how I say it. I'm going to go with that. You could also say caramel or caramel, but a caramel sauce versus a caramel. Now, what we won't be making is toffee. That's different. Like that real hard, crunchy thing. Not so much. But you will get to see the subtle variation when you want to make a caramel sauce versus a caramel. Stick with me. Caramel, caramel, caramel. Pick your poison. There are kind of two versions. The first is the kind that you would want to use as a sauce. So say you want to have a pourable sauce to serve at the table with a dessert, or you want something that you can put into the fridge and reuse over and over again, you're gonna make a sauce for that. And I go into detail. So this has been sitting for 5 hours or so at room temperature. This is what the sauce looks like. You can see it's milky, right? This is the consistency. It's still pourable. It's obviously thicker than, just cream, but it's very pourable, but makes a delightful sauce. And so this is at room temperature, okay? This is the kind that I more call caramel or caramel rather than a sauce. And you can see it's clearer, right? I'll show you. One is milkier, one is more clear, right? We've cooked off a lot more of the cream to make this version. And so you can see the consistency of this. It's a lot more like jelly, right? It still will pour a bit, but it's much thicker. And you can see as I stirred it, kind of stays clumped together. So this has been at room temperature about 3 hours. I made them after the first one. And so I made some yesterday so you can see what happens. So this one is see if you can guess, this one is the more caramel version that's been put in the fridge. And then I took it out to be so this is room temperature again. And you can see it's more like butter, like more hard. It's not hard, like it is, you can smoosh it around, but it's not a sauce, right? This is the sauce version, and you can see it's creamier. Now it's still sort of thick, a little too thick for a sauce use, but you can see it's starting to go. This, I did the same thing. I put it in the fridge overnight, and then I took it out to get to room temperature. Now, here's the trick. I can reheat this one carefully to be back to this. I can't reheat this one. So if I tried to, one time out of 20 it would work, but for the most part, if I reheat this one even carefully, it's gonna separate. So if you're making this situation, you need to use it the day of and just leave it out. If you're using it later, you can make it ahead. This is perfectly fine, right? Like say you're having a little keto ice cream party and you want this for later, a dollop of that on it would be lovely. You might use this to do something like make more of like a pecan pie kind of thing, so there are a lot of uses for this, but this is a day of situation, people, okay? So this one, the sauce, can be kept in the fridge. I would bring it out if you want to reuse it later. For best use day of. It's my honest opinion. But bring it out to room temperature. But sometimes you make a lot and you want to use it a little at a time. Starting over. Keep it in the fridge. Take it out. Let it get back to room temperature. Put it in a pan on low. As low as you can go. You're heating it very slowly. And just as it heats to a more stirrable consistency, take it off the heat. Because it's that cream and butter together, it can separate really easily. So you're going real gentle with that. You can't put it in the microwave. Bad things will happen. Again, You might get lucky, and 1 time out of 20 it kind of worked, but as far as I can tell, really dicey. Again, I just think it's really cool how this one is so translucent-y. I mean, I guess not completely, but it's, you know, the color is so much less milky, obviously, because we've cooked off so much more of the cream. And it's just a matter of a couple of minutes difference in cooking. Now, what affects the color of your caramel is how long you browned the butter. I go on the cautious side. If you brown it longer than I do, you get a browner caramel, but you'll also get more of a burnt butter situation risk, and you can often end up with little flecks in there, which you might love. If you like that kind of burnt butter taste, go for it. But I kind of like it in the safe zone, especially when I'm teaching you guys. Then you get mad if it doesn't work. But there you go on how to make either caramel sauce or caramel sauce or caramel or caramel. Too many. Pecan, I don't know where you live. Call it what you will.
Okay, first we're going to need a flat-bottomed saucepan. So it needs some surface area touching the burner. It can't be too narrow at the bottom. You want it more wide than it is tall. And what we're going to do is we are going to put that on a medium heat. And then what we're going to do after that is cube up a stick of butter, which is a 1/2 cup. And then we're going to allow that to melt. And then we are going to let that simmer, checking it occasionally by sort of rolling the butter in the pan because the foam on top will sort of obscure it. Check it about every minute or so, and we'll let it come over about 5 minutes from a yellow color, and then it will become sort of a slightly more golden color, and then it'll turn more amber. We want to make sure it's not burning, so you want to make sure you keep an eye on this. But once it becomes that nice amber color, we're going to add our sweetener. I use brown sugar Swerve. It enhances the darkness and gives it a caramely flavor. Yes, it's a little cheat, but it works. And we're going to stir that in really well. Now, I don't like it very sweet, which is strange because caramel is usually very sweet, but I like it a more buttery flavor. And so I just use 2 tablespoons. If you want it sweeter, you can use more. Everything else will remain the same. Oh, I forgot to say, I use salted butter, like a nice high quality salted butter, like a Clover, like a local dairy, or you can use a Kerrygold. You're going to want that to be a nice quality butter because you really taste it. And then we are going to let that simmer with the sweetener in it until it turns sort of a caramel color, right? It's going to get thicker and richer in color. Again, really being careful not to let it burn. You can give it a little stir every once in a while to check. But once it comes to a thick consistency, the color is glossy, and it's caramel in color, we are going to, at that point, add the cream. And then optional, but a lovely addition, is maybe 6 or so drops of a Sweet Leaf Stevia in an English Toffee or vanilla. And then we are going to let that come to a full simmer, like a fairly active simmer. You don't want it to boil because then that means like big bubbles are coming up and it's going to boil over. But it's not a low simmer. It's pretty significant simmer. And we're just going to keep that on the simmer until it starts to darken and thicken. And as you notice, it's getting darker and thicker, and you see the bubbles are a little bigger because it's getting more concentrated. At about the 5 or 6 minute mark, you want to check on it and see, does it seem like the consistency basically of a sauce? Am I seeing a thickness, a richness in that sauce that wasn't there before as some of the liquid has boiled out? So give it a stir to check, and if you think so, pop a spoon in it and look at the back of that spoon. It should have a nice coat. It shouldn't be spotty. And if that seems to be happening at that point, which again is usually around the 5 or 6, maybe 7, maybe 8, somewhat how much heat you've been using, because there can be some variation there. We'll change that up a bit. But once you feel like, yeah, we're pretty much there, remembering as it cools to room temperature, will thicken slightly more. Remove it from the heat, put it on another burner that's not been hot, and let it cool for about 30 minutes. And then what you should see is something like this, a nice, thick, yet pourable sauce consistency. That's sort of a warm, cream, golden color. And you can check it again with a spoon, and it should be pretty thick on the back of that spoon. And at that point, you have your caramel sauce. Okay, but say you didn't want a pourable sauce. You wanted actual, thick, dark caramel, more like what you would buy in a jar of caramel, right? So just pretend we didn't do that last part of taking it off the heat and allow it to continue to boil. I'm sorry, I said boil. I meant to say simmer. So allow it to continue to simmer. It's going to simmer until it gets very concentrated and much darker. And you can check it by whisking it at this point, and you'll see that it's still slightly more liquidy. And we're going to let it go for a couple more minutes. You'll notice it gets another level browner. And when it starts to no longer, in my opinion, be called a sauce, what we're doing is we are going to see that it is glossier and thicker and darker. The point at which I consider it done is when you can see it's reduced in size significantly, and it feels like it's kind of holding together with some thickness. So when you stir it, you can see those whisk marks in it. You can see that it's kind of moving as a mass a bit in the pan. And so give it a quick, hard stir, and you'll see it kind of feels almost like a solid shape. At that point, I feel like it is done. And you can see this visually as it starts to change over into a more brown, glossy caramel. I at that point take it off of the heat and let it cool for about 10 minutes. Because this one actually you want to use while it's still kind of warm, but you definitely don't want it so hot it's going to burn you when you use it. You should be able to stick your finger in it and it's just warm, not hot. And you can see here that it is glossy, it is dark, it is definitely shiny. You get a very shiny effect with this. And again, if you boiled it slightly, I keep saying boiled, if you simmered it slightly less, when it was in the sort of browning butter stage, it will have a slightly lighter color, but the glossiness and the consistency will be the same even if you didn't take it as far in the browning stage. But maybe at this last stage of making caramel, you cooked it a little too long, and you notice it's kind of gloopy. It's not really silky and lovely. Well, there's an easy fix for most times. Just toss in like a tablespoon of cream, take it off the heat immediately, turn that heat off, and then vigorously whisk that cream in. It'll back it up a couple of minutes, just quickly. And then let it cool from that stage. It won't work 100% of the time, but if you catch it at the right moment, that can back it up a step and fix the problem. All right. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have questions, please let me know. Be prepared for some color variation when you make it at different times. That's just gonna happen. Unless you are making it over and over again in exactly the same circumstances with exactly the same amount of stirring, there will be some slight variation. It will still taste the same. It will be delicious. Have a great time. Bye.